sometimes, a life of love, loss and erasure, and it's Paul's life story basically, and tied up with nearly 30 years of living with me, which isn't easy.
This book is about me growing up in California as a young gay man, moving to the UK, falling in love with Andy and Erasure, and surviving my stroke and obtaining a whole new life, really.
This is when Paul was about 10 years old and decided he was questioning his sexuality. Worried about my sexuality, I finally plucked up the courage to write to Anne Landers, the agony aunt, on the local newspaper. She wrote back telling me I urgently needed psychiatric help since I had a terrible disease, and that only a medical professional could help me to see life as a normal human being once more. Luckily, I knew enough about myself to realise this was the worst possible advice. In fact, she helped me to see that I needed to be honest and to believe in myself. I used to dream of being able to marry a gay pop star when I grew up. I would kneel beside my bed and pray for someone like Fabian or Frankie Avalon each night before I went to sleep.
Growing up and trying to, knowing that you're gay from a very young age, I probably knew I was gay around 8 or 9 years old. Knowing that all the way through high school is very difficult to cope with. And I think you start to go through that process of thinking that you change your life and be straight. And so I had girlfriends and had sexual partners with girls. I always knew deep inside that I was gay, and it was very unfair of me not to admit that to myself and to any woman that was about to have a relationship with. My first outing was in Monterey, because I read a gay bar in Monterey called the Gilded Caves, which I went to, but that's the first gay bar I went to when I was underage. I was about 18. I had a false ID, so I was able to get into the club. And we went up to San Francisco a few times, partied up there. So at that time, it was in the late 60s, so it was a good time to play up in San Francisco, because that was during the time of Sylvester and the whole era up there, who Sylvester I eventually wound up meeting later on and dating.
Well, the next extract I'm going to read is just after Paul had moved out of his family home. I think he was 16 or 17, and he was just trying to kind of find a way for himself, and I think giving in to a little bit of peer pressure. In 1968, I met a group of military policemen who were stationed at Fort Ord, a local US Army base, and my little one-bedroom house became their regular haunt. 5 or 6 of them were much older than me, anything between 22 and 40, and my house was a refuge where they could relax, hang up their helmets and get stoned. The soldiers were my heroes, with their shocking shrapnel wounds all over their arms and legs. To me, they had the guts to survive the draft, which I was dreading, and the fighting in the front lines of Cambodia or Vietnam, an experience that most every high school boy was terrified of. They were war heroes who had come back as drug addicts, and I thought the world of them. They were also gorgeous. They had hundreds of stories to tell of a world that was so foreign to me as to be virtually unimaginable. I trusted them enough to give them the keys to my house.
A big part of the book is about Andy, of course, and when we met each other, and how that evolved into me starting to manage him and working with Erasure. I was always into music, and when I met Andy, it was quite odd because I didn't know he was a singer, and I was always showing off about my voice and my songs, and making him listen to me play piano and my singing. And he never really said much about what he was doing. Of course, he was, during the day, he was going off to meet with Vince and working at the studio on the next songs, on the new songs, the first songs. That then became my life, because I fell in love with Andy in a big way. I knew that he was the right one. It's sort of like, you sort of know when somebody's the right person that's going to be the next one for a long time. The stroke happened in 2000, and we don't know why it happened. Nobody knows what causes stroke. A stroke is a very difficult thing to to find out there's no particular reason why it happens. Mine was probably due to lots of playing and lots of drugs and lots of flying and being excessive in everything I was doing. When I came out of my shock in 2000 and I decided to write the book, I couldn't speak and I wanted to learn. The only way I could speak was by typing, because my mind was still working. I was several years after my stroke, but my mind was still working, and I wanted to write down what I thought. My speech was very bad for several years, still is pretty bad. But Andy sort of encouraged me to do that.
This is a little piece of when Paul had just come out of his coma, and they had to tie him down in a straitjacket because he was hyperactive, and they thought he might try to escape, and he relates to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They put me in the straitjacket initially to stop me thrashing around and pulling out my catheter like a madman. I dreamed I was trapped in a labyrinth of spiders' webs, strapped to the bed and unable to attract anyone's attention or call for help. I just had to lie perfectly still, frozen with fear, staring at the ceiling lights whose panels of almost clear soft frosted glass were crawling with the long-legged monsters. The light projected the giant shadows of these legs all across the ceiling. When I was 4 or 5, my mother had to wake me gently in the early hours of the morning in order to thrash with her broom an unsuspecting tarantula she'd spotted dozing on my pillow. I never forget opening my eyes as I surfaced from that deep sleep and seeing those huge hairy legs in front of me. The nurse who read to me, I believed, was an alien trying to take Andy away from me, and I attacked him viciously when he was trying to help me one night. I've since rung to apologise him and to make sure he understands just how important he was to my recovery, and I was convinced the head nurse, Felicia, would enter my room at night, pull out my arm, make an incision, and lay a powder of morphine, opium, and voodoo leaves right into my mainline vein, folding the skin back like she was rolling a cigarette, and whispering softly in my ear, "Good night, sweetheart. I'll see you again tomorrow night."
You are one of the world's great talkers, aren't you? I mean, I remember...
I used to be, not anymore.
And a singer as well, you said.
Yeah, I used to sing too.
How frustrating is it?
That's the most frustrating part of the whole journey, I think. I think that's the saddest part too for me. I said I'd not be able to use my voice anymore. And then even in the times that I was able to sing and play piano and do music, I never really shared it with anybody else except Andy. A few close friends. But I think that's the worst thing, not being able to have that back again.
This is his story, and really it's a survival guide, I think.
Is the book any good?
The book's fantastic.